Something has felt different lately. It's not a crisis. Your life hasn't fallen apart. You're still answering the texts and still showing up when you need to, still laughing at the right moments, but something inside you feels far away. I remember a season where I'd sit in my car for 10 or 15 minutes before going inside my own house, just staring at the dashboard. I wasn't waiting for a song to finish. I was avoiding the quiet because I knew the second I stepped inside and everything got still, I'd have to admit that I didn't recognize my own life anymore. That terrified me because on the outside, everything looked fine, but inside, I was disconnecting from a version of myself that used to feel like home. Maybe you're in that silence right now, smiling through conversations while feeling emotionally distant, miles away from everyone around you, asking yourself that one question that keeps rising. What if I'm losing myself? But what if you are not losing yourself at all? What if God is loosening your grip on a version of life your soul has already outgrown? Because before God changes your direction, He often makes it harder to stay comfortable where you no longer belong. That heavy silence, that strange feeling that your old life doesn't fit anymore. It's not a malfunction. It's a transition. You think something is wrong with you, but maybe God is waking something inside you that can no longer stay where it was. Because sometimes the first sign that God is leading you somewhere new is that your old life stops feeling like home.
When your life still looks normal, but your soul doesn't.
One of the hardest things about transition seasons is that your external life can stay almost exactly the same while your internal world starts shifting underneath it. That disconnect can make you question yourself. You start wondering if you're becoming too sensitive, too distant, too emotional. But a lot of the time, what's actually happening is quieter than that. God often works quieter than we expect. Sometimes transformation doesn't arrive like lightning. Sometimes it arrives like discomfort you can't shake. You just begin noticing things differently. A room that used to energize you suddenly drains you. You answer a phone call already knowing you'll feel emotionally exhausted afterward. You walk into spaces you once loved and feel strangely detached from them now. Not because you hate those people, not because you think you're better than anyone. Something in you is just changing. And because there was no dramatic event attached to it, you struggle to explain the feeling, even to yourself. Scripture shows this pattern constantly. Before Abraham entered a new season, he had to leave familiarity behind. Before David stepped into leadership, there were hidden caves first. Before Jesus entered ministry publicly, there was wilderness privately. That pattern matters more than people realize, because sometimes God creates distance before He creates clarity. And not everything uncomfortable is wrong. Some seasons feel confusing because your spirit recognizes the shift before your mind fully understands it. But this is usually the moment people become afraid. Because when disconnection lasts too long, people start interpreting transition as failure. And that misunderstanding can quietly damage someone for years.
The grief of outgrowing an older version of yourself.
I honestly think one of the strangest forms of grief is realizing you cannot fully return to who you used to be anymore, even when part of you misses that version of yourself, because familiarity has emotional gravity to it. Human beings will hold on to familiar emptiness simply because it feels predictable. That's real. And when God starts shifting your direction internally, some things naturally begin losing their emotional grip on you. Not because you suddenly became holier, not because you're spiritually superior. Sometimes your soul is just recognizing that it cannot survive on the same emotional diet anymore. And that realization can feel incredibly lonely at first, especially when everyone around you still expects the old version of you to respond the same way. Some of you know exactly what I mean. You've laughed in conversations while feeling emotionally absent the entire time. You've opened apps out of habit and stared at the screen without caring about anything you were looking at. You've sat around people you genuinely love and still felt disconnected in ways you couldn't explain. That kind of emotional confusion can make people feel guilty, but not everything uncomfortable is wrong. Ecclesiastes says, "To everything there is a season, and some things belong to previous seasons, even if you loved them deeply." That doesn't always make the separation painless, but it does make it meaningful, because some transitions are less about losing your life and more about outgrowing versions of yourself that no longer fit where God is taking you next. Now, let me slow this down for a second, because this next part matters deeply. A quiet season is not always a punishment, and it's not always isolation either. Sometimes it's an invitation. There's a difference.
When God removes the noise.
I don't think God pulls people into quieter seasons to make them feel spiritually impressive. Usually, it does the opposite. The quieter life becomes, the harder it is to hide from yourself. That's why silence feels uncomfortable for so many people. Noise distracts, and silence has a strange way of showing you what you've been avoiding emotionally for a long time. And sometimes we don't realize how emotionally overcrowded our lives have become until God starts removing distractions one by one, not to hurt us, to help us hear again, hear our exhaustion, hear our fear, hear the prayers we've been avoiding because we didn't know how to say them honestly. It took me a while to realize God was exposing things I had spent years trying to outrun. That season taught me something important. Some transitions cannot be rushed, and some seasons are not meant to be escaped quickly. They're meant to be understood. Honestly, the way of light isn't always bright all at once. Sometimes it's just enough light for the next step. And honestly, that used to frustrate me. But trust grows differently in partial light. I used to think silence meant something was wrong. That was when life grew quieter, heavier. Maybe God had stepped back. But I was wrong. Over time, I realized something deeper. Sometimes God removes the noise, not to abandon you, but so you can finally hear what matters. And maybe that's why you're here, searching for truth, searching for clarity, trying to hear God in seasons that don't make immediate sense.
God doesn't waste hidden seasons.
Isaiah 43, verses 18 to 19 says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing." I used to love that verse, in theory. But when you're emotionally exhausted, new thing doesn't always sound exciting. Sometimes it sounds expensive, because new seasons usually require old attachments to loosen first. And that process can feel strangely physical. Some of you have been standing in the kitchen late at night lately, just staring into nothing for a few extra seconds. Some of you have been replaying old conversations in your head, while knowing deep down something has shifted emotionally. Some of you have been standing in the shower longer lately, because it's one of the only moments your mind finally becomes quiet. And some nights, you've been lying in bed, exhausted physically, but your thoughts still won't settle down emotionally. That's what internal transition can feel like. Quiet, disorienting, invisible. But in the economy of heaven, nothing is wasted. Not confusion, not loneliness, not hidden seasons, not even the nights where you felt emotionally numb and couldn't explain why. God often does his deepest work in hidden seasons, not public ones. And maybe the reason this season feels so strange is that part of your old life is ending emotionally before the next part fully begins. That in-between space can feel deeply uncomfortable. But it can also become sacred if you stop fighting it long enough to listen. Because sometimes growth doesn't feel like becoming someone new. Sometimes it feels like finally becoming honest. And honestly, some of the people watching this right now are not broken. You're just in the middle of becoming unfamiliar with your old life.
Pray honestly, not perfectly.
So, if you've been feeling disconnected lately, don't immediately assume something is wrong with you. Slow down enough to listen to what this season might be trying to reveal. Pray honestly, not polished prayers, not spiritual performances, real ones. The kind where you finally admit, God, I don't fully understand what's happening inside me lately. Honestly, I think some of the most important prayers people ever pray are the ones that don't sound impressive at all. And if this video found you at the exact moment you needed it, let me know in the comments. Not perfectly, not deeply, just honestly. Even if it's only, this is exactly how I've been feeling. And if you've been quietly walking through emotionally confusing seasons with God, subscribe to the Way of Light, because this channel is not built for perfect people. It's built for people trying to find clarity while walking through complicated seasons, honestly. And don't stop here. Watch the next video on this channel, because this video explains the disconnect. But if you've been physically exhausted lately, because your soul won't stop talking at 3 a.m., you need to watch that next. Sometimes, the second conversation is the one that finally makes the first one make sense.